Ryan, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Super, super excited to have you back on. Could you start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Ryan Patrick. I am a business owner in Erlanger, Kentucky. My business is called Peak Fitness and Sports Training. We've been in business for about 13 years now, and we primarily serve athletes these days. I'd still say from a business standpoint, we're probably about 40, 60 adults to athletes. We still have quite a few adults. Many have been with us for a long time, so we're getting to see kind of how their program changes over time. But yeah, I mean, that's the gist, I think.
I love it. I love it. And talk to me, because you've been on the show before, been a couple
Yep.
of years, but what's new in your world since the last time we chatted?
So I think personally, my own training has shifted quite a bit. I think when I was on, it was prior to COVID. That was kind of the peak of my powerlifting stuff.
Yep.
And somewhere along the way, we started to get more athletes, and I realized very quickly that I could not move. And so
Yeah.
it kind of required me to shift my own training. And inside of that, we opened a new gym about a year before COVID. So we're settled in now. We're kind of coming up on the end of our lease. So we're looking to expand. I know you have turf too. So it's like, I just don't feel like we can ever get enough space.
Yeah.
So we're combating that, just, the usual logistics. But I mean, our focus now is athletes. Our primary market is high school age. Some late middle school, some college, some pro. So we're across the board, but the sweet spot for us is definitely the high school athlete.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. People ask me what I'm training for these days. And I'm like, to be able to demo things to my athletes and not look like a total goof when I do it.
Yeah, I'm turning the corner to 40. So I'm like trying to hang on to every bit of athleticism that I can and
Yes.
do whatever I can to feel young because, man, years of just grinding under the bar, it's got a cost where some days I'm like, it's a little stiff. Like, I don't like this.
Yes.
But
Yes. I love it, man. So, man, there's like so many things that I want to talk to you about today. And I just feel like you and I have very similar lenses. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like the time that we came up or what, but I feel like we look at a lot of things through similar lenses. So one thing that I want to start with is talking about our mutual good friend, Bill Hartman. Obviously, you've been to the intensive. I believe we were in day ocho together. Yes.
Yep. The Ocho.
Intensive number 8. Yes. So let's start there. How has your time studying Bill's model influenced your programming and your coaching?
Yeah. So I always joke I'm a bit of a smooth brain. Bill and I have been doing some like one-on-one mentoring for probably the last 18 months because, anybody who's new to his model, I think it's a little bit of a shock. There's some terms he uses that maybe aren't part of the normal lexicon of the field. And I don't think it's to a marketing ploy or anything. I think he's really searching for kind of the most complete or comprehensive definition for what we're looking at.
Yep.
So that was really, I think, one of the biggest takeaways that I got from his stuff because, initially it was very complex to understand the stuff, but in the end, the execution of what we're doing becomes very, very simple. And that's what I love because we don't have to use fancy resets or all this other stuff. And, I came up with you guys doing like PRI and, FRC was on the map. And it always seemed like some of these commercial models, they had algorithms, but there would always be a situation you'd get into where it's like, well, this person is, they're just kind of over here. They don't really fit the normal stuff. And, I always knew there were other answers that we could look at. And I feel like Bill's, if it kind of casts a net or an umbrella, it seems to include the most bandwidth and breadth of accounting for some of these nuances. And so, I think the big things really were just kind of the systemic influences of, managing gravity, managing internal forces, how airflow and pressures interact with that in terms of us creating a compensatory strategy. And then really diving a little bit deeper into connective tissue behavior, because that's, especially when it comes to performance, this is something that has been a real game changer for us. And I think at the surface level, a lot of people understand, the differences in velocity of contraction of, muscle versus like a MTU, musculotendinous unit. And so just understanding a little bit more of the nuance behind that has just been transformational in terms of the interventions that we're able to give to our athletes and clients and see changes rapidly. So, at the end of this, I'll probably share my Instagram page, but we've had some stuff where, knees are collapsing on something as simple as a vertical jump, and we're able to, kind of reorient, shift somebody's center of mass very quickly and see a positive change. And, with as much competition as we're up against with these athletes, with their schedules, their social lives, their schoolwork, we have to be able to make some pretty big changes rapidly. And so, at the end of it, I feel like Bill's model has given us a clear path in terms of what we want to accomplish with athletes, clear understanding of what we're looking at, and then ultimately how to make some interventions and modify our perspective if things aren't working the way that we want.
I love it. I love it. Talk to me about resets, because I feel like this is still to this day a pretty hot button topic. Again, you kind of came up with us and we went through hey man, everybody's going to lay on the floor and do these 5 breathing exercises. And I remember it was actually Molly Galbraith, and Molly was coming up to the gym regularly. And she's like, look, Mike, I love you. You've gotten me great results, but I don't have 20 to 25 minutes to lay on my back or on my side and breathe. So talk to me about how that has evolved for you and your thought process on this, because I think a lot of people are still there, right? They think, oh man, I got to breathe for 25 minutes before I go and train. Where are you at with resets, and how are you approaching that these days?
These days, the most that we'll do is a couple sets of 5 to 10 breaths. It really is that simple. And part of this, and I tell everybody, I almost feel like I put a disclaimer out, like, look, I hate this stuff. I hate doing it. I really don't like watching it. And I only do it when things hurt and I know that I need to do it. That's really the game changer for me, because I'm kind of a meathead, and it's like, if I don't need to do it, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So, nowadays there are areas that we want to get airflow. Most of the guys who are in the gym, who are lifting, guys and girls, they're going to get some compression front to back. They're going to lose certain ranges of motion that we can identify with table tests. And so we know that we need to direct airflow to some key areas. I think the simple analogy that I've heard is that, hey, your lung is going to fill like a glass of water from bottom to top. And so we know that if the range of motion drops off, that we need to start working through that. And so it becomes very simple to implement some stuff. Now, we've also been able to use some slight modifications to exercise prescription that allow us to still continue to do what we want. So, for example, if we use like an oblique sit on a row, or we put something in a split stance, we can still bias airflow to the areas that we need, accomplish the goals, and minimize the amount of time that people are on the ground. Because the reality is it's not exciting. And unless they've got a really strong reason to do it, especially my athletes who tend to just feel good, and we can demonstrate really quickly, what it's going to do for them, it's a tough sell. And so it kind of necessitated a change just by virtue of, well, we've got minimal time. We need to drive maximal change. This is a really important topic. I think if you can get airflow to the right areas, you can see some changes instantly. But it's just really learning how to distill it down to what's the one thing that they need to do to nudge the needle forward and get us into a better position. And, even to that point, it's like when you kind of go back to Bill's stuff, when you realize there are systemic changes that happen with this stuff, then you can start to integrate the exercises alongside of this stuff and continue to reinforce and give that athlete multiple opportunities throughout the session to kind of hit the same target, to continue to drive airflow in the same way. And so it becomes, it's a redundancy in a sense, but it's not a redundancy and I'm on the ground doing 5 different things trying to accomplish the same thing. Now we're exercising. Now we're creating a training effect. And that to me is really where the value is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I've found the more I can incorporate those concepts into an actual exercise routine where they're standing up, they feel like they're training. They are training, obviously, but they feel like they're training. They feel like they're accomplishing something more than just laying around and moving air. Man, immediately the buy-in is better. And as well as I do, like, I hate the term functional. I know Bill hates the term functional, but it's more functional, right? If you're achieving and capturing these postures, these positions, driving ear into the right spaces in a split stance versus laying on your side, hey man, it's a lot more valuable and a lot more impactful, at least in my book. So,
yeah.
Okay. So one other question, in your time working with athletes, what are some of the big things that you're chasing from a movement perspective to help them move more efficiently? Like, what are some of your big rocks?
Absolutely. I think above all, my goal is to fill empty buckets for the athletes. Give them the things that they're not getting that are going to improve their speed, power, or strength. And that's the end. For me, my end goal for all of my athletes is to have obviously resiliency, bulletproof, whatever you want to call it. I want them to be as robust as possible, or anti-fragile, or however you want to think about it. But at the end of the day, as the competition escalates, as they move from, middle school to freshman to JV to varsity in the college and beyond, the speed of play, the athleticism is going to increase proportionately. And so, I want all roads to lead to, more speed or more vertical, whatever that looks like. So I tell them, I will get you as strong as humanly possible until it stops to transfer over to what we really need.
Yep.
And I think that will tie into some of the tech and how we're able to, discern when a good transition in training should occur. So that's one thing. And I think with all of this, it's stress management. COVID was really interesting because, our athletes had more time at home. They were eating home cooked meals, not at hotels and restaurants. They weren't traveling. They didn't have the jet lag, the change in time zones. They were sleeping enough. And it seemed like all of them grew and filled out and just looked amazing. And it was just such a testament to, just stress management and getting proper recovery. So a big chunk of what we do is really managing stress, because our athletes are up against it's almost like we had kind of 2021 was like people were still kind of prioritizing family a little bit. Like they realized the value of that. And then it seems like all the club stuff has just skyrocketed in the past 2 years, and it's as bad as it ever was. Athletes have periods of congested competition. They're playing multiple sports at once, or they're taking lessons and doing, a number of other things. And so we have very limited time to work with them. So a lot of what we need to do really centers around stress management. Is this a day where we can truly train and give you a high stimulus, or is it something where we need to prioritize recovery and think about minimal effective dose? Because I think there's always the opportunity, especially for young athletes, to, they're pretty resilient. They can recover from a lot. So we want to make sure that we're not overdoing it and tracking those things. From a movement standpoint, I think one of our big rocks when it comes to working with athletes is increase their movement options. If, they have a deficit of hip internal rotation, that is going to directly impact how effective they are loading and unloading a cut, for example. And so we want to monitor that stuff as well. So that's where we kind of integrate some of the movement or table test in with what their representation of speed or agility look like.
I love it. So it's really interesting. You talk about knowing what you can do with high school kids on any given day, right? I think it drives Sandy. I think Sandy, my current intern, who's also a member of PeakFAST and all that. But I think it drives Sandy insane because there are lots of days where my high school kids walk in. She's like, "What are they doing today?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Wait till they come in and I'll tell you." Right. And I basically, like you alluded to, I've got it broken down into 3 days. We have actual training days where they've had some time off and they're ready to load and maybe create a training adaptation. There's a stim day where, hey man, they're going to play tomorrow. So ramp them up, make sure they feel good. And then there's a recovery day. It's like the days of trying to set out this really nicely laid out periodized program for high school kids is just non-existent these days, at least in my opinion. It's very, very hard because there's no consistency in their training schedule and there's no breaks in their competition schedule.
Yeah, I would frequently look at Tutor Bogba and the year plan. I'm like, what?
Those are
to me,
how cool would that be, right?
To me, I'm like, they're making, quadrennial, 4-year plans. I'm like, this is insane.
I can't play in the next 4 days.
For real. And for myself too.
Yeah.
We had an athlete this summer. This is just a classic example. He wanted to get faster for football. He's coming in for us 3 days a week. He was training with his football team, lifting 3 to 4 days a week, and they go hard. They go really hard. Clean, squats, heavy deadlifts, all bilateral, sagittal,
Yeah.
Typical bigger, faster, stronger stuff. Totally
Right.
fine. I don't hate it. But then on top of that, he was getting really into like Muay Thai and no-gi jujitsu. So this kid was probably training, uh, 15 to 18 hours a week.
Wow.
And it became really tough to like have a high stim day. Like I know if we want to improve your speed that you've got to touch max velocity fairly frequently if we're going to
Yeah.
push those numbers up. But he would come in totally wrecked. Either, they were holding pads or he took a elbow to the thigh or just the general fatigue of doing all of that. Now we'll give him credit. He did a great job, eating big, recovering, but we had to become very unstructured with our training.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, if, you're cashed out, it's going to be more of a technical day. We're going to work on reinforcing the framework of what a change of direction looks like. So I want you to feel the hip change levels. I want you to feel a plant angle. I want you to feel the center of pressure being in the appropriate spot on your foot. And then there were other days where it's like, you know what? I feel great today. Things are going. You kind of come in, you just hit that bounce of the step. That's a high velocity day.
Yeah.
And the more his training escalated over time, the less frequent those became. But again, to your point, it was a huge management process of knowing when to strike and when to make sure that we were giving him stuff that was still going to be useful, that was still training, but wasn't kind of overfilling the cup in terms of what he was actually able to recover from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I want to shift gears here because I've noticed a big shift in recent years with tech. I know I'm more into tech now than I definitely have been in the past. I know you're using more. So just for starters, what got you started on that rabbit hole?
Probably doing master's thesis in biomechanics. That was my first exposure to force plates. Right. And once you see that, it's everything else is compared against that gold standard. And so it was great. I loved it. I loved seeing that data. I loved all the things we could do with it. I didn't really enjoy inverse dynamics, but the actual data collection process was really valuable. And for me, the tech kind of came in as more commercially available things became, I think, consumer edition, financially feasible.
Yeah.
I wanted to start to get my hands on this stuff because I wanted a really real way to look at some of the objective measures that our athletes were getting. And at first it was just, well, how can I effectively and accurately quantify what their performance is? And then, as a second step, it's like, what can I do with that? So, really, I think it goes all the way back to that of just knowing, okay, there's more data here. Like maybe I don't want to wait on research to come out 5 years later while they're running all these tests. It's becoming accessible to me. And so now I can start to make some informed decisions based on what I know and based on what I'm seeing. And really when it comes down to it, it's, all the research stuff is, based on populations and averages and stuff. So it's, being able to look at this athlete in front of me and making some training based decisions and seeing what the outcome is.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about it before the show. Like, let's say you and I are the best coaches on the planet, right? Which sounds amazing. And I would love to hang my hat on that. But even if we're really good coaches, right? Having the objective data, right? Either from an assessment process, on a return to play process, having the objectivity to go back and look at hard data and say, hey, look, my eyes are seeing this, but I see it in your numbers too. Mm-hmm. There's an element of, of just like showing people, like, it's not just me thinking this is actually what it looks like on paper. This is like science, right? And so I think there's value in that. And you and I have both been in this game long enough. Like, we know, right? You can tell if somebody's getting faster, if they're moving in and out of cuts better and that sort of thing. But being able to show a kid or a parent, hey, look, little Johnny has put 5 inches on his vertical and that's great, but he's doing it in a faster amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. Or little Susie, she looks better coming in and out of cuts, but now here we've got data to support that as well. Like having the visual for them can go a long way to buying more buy-in, right? And ultimately more time training these people down the line.
100%. And, especially with just going back to some of the stuff that we talked about with Bill and making some of these movement changes, like we can use some of that, which I think there's a science to it for sure, but there's an art and an understanding and an experience that comes with the coaching eye. So it's like, I watch this kid go in and out of a cut. Okay. They don't hit, medial foot contact. So they rear up like a horse as they go out of the cut. We do something, we reinforce that and the cut looks better, but now the parent can see the time go down and we can take still shots, which I still think are great data of saying, hey, here's what it was. Here's what it is now. Now we can start to stack, speed, power, strength on top of that. And boom, we've got an athlete who's making progress. And the other piece is too, it's like, we have to really think about this process of training, right? So these athletes, like we talked about, do come in on certain days and they're not giving us they're not giving us their best because maybe they're tired or they have to dig a little bit deeper into the well instead of, doing their sets at, a reps in reserve of 2. Now it's like 0 to 1. And so that just playing that close to the threshold is going to have a greater cost of recovery. And so now we can make objective decisions about what they need to be doing and they can appreciate it. And really it's not that they appreciate it in the moment because no athlete likes to scale back. So you got to finesse them a little bit, I think.
Right.
Which I'm fine with. I got that down pat. But hey, we're going to try this thing today. But it becomes more enticing to them next week when, now they're recovered and now they don't have this accumulation of fatigue because we were able to get rid of that by making intelligent training decisions. And I think a lot of people, I know Andy McCloy has, we've all griped about being reactive in this field because we don't know what the sport coach is going to do. Maybe they got beat by several points or touchdowns and now the kids are running, line drills for 2 hours at practice, but then they come to us and they're totally destroyed. So it's like, again, we have to kind of work with this stuff. Or if they've got these big tournaments and, they went to the semifinals or the finals. And so there's 2 or 3 or 4 extra games that they're playing because they're good. Well, not only are they playing more games, but they're playing higher level competition, which is probably going to be higher intensity. So there's so many things that we have to account for.
Yes.
And that tech allows us not only to get some objective measures, but even with the vertical jump, we can look at what's the strategy of how they're actually doing this. He's jumping as high, but maybe his time to take off is significantly longer. Maybe this left-right asymmetry that was like 5% is measuring like 15% today because he swung the bat 5,000 times over the weekend. So that's the stuff where we can really start to tease out a little bit more what's going on under the hood, if you will. And actually, I think make some super powerful changes to the training process and ultimately results for the athletes.
Well, the other thing too, I always come back to is if you've got athletes that are willing to learn and they're willing to understand how their bodies work, it makes for great discussions, right? You can really start to see how, these extra games, the toll that it takes on your body or the stress that they have no clue, right? They just know they're stressed about their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their dog is sick, whatever. Stress has a real impact on my performance. And these tests are so much more sensitive, right? Like that's what I always come back to. Like athletes are athletes. They're great compensators. They're going to find a strategy to produce a result. But you and I both know that strategy isn't always optimal and it may not be the best thing for them to be doing long term. But I think having more sensitive tests and being able to start to test these things and then have discussions and educate our athletes is such a powerful aspect of having tech in your facility.
Yeah. Tony Holler is one of my favorite speed guys right now. Are you familiar with him?
He's hilarious. Yeah.
So he always says, we don't run tired, sore, or heartbroken. And nothing could, every time I hear that, I'm like, that is so accurate. And I always joke with the girls when they come in, I'm like, especially heartbroken for the boys because they just take it way harder.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's, you can't get to that level. If I think back, one of the most powerful things I've ever learned from you is kind of this neural metabolic continuum. Yeah. And when you're on the metabolic side, it's a little bit easier to dig.
Yep.
When you're neural, like if I'm pulling 90% or I need to run 95%, if I don't have it, the well is not as like, I'm already at the bottom of the well. There's not much more that I can ask out of myself. And it's very hard to fake. So
yes,
I think you have to recognize that and really respect it, because that's when you start to flirt with injury, just for the sake of saying, this is what's on the program and this is what I have to do today.
Yeah. I love it, man. Okay. So following on this theme of tech, I would love to hear the pieces that you've chosen, right? Because again, we're small private facilities. We're not, one of these huge NBA or NFL teams where it's unlimited resources, unlimited access. So I'd love to hear the pieces that you chose and then maybe your thought process behind that. Like, why did you pick the tools or the items that you chose?
Yeah. The very first thing that we got into, and this has been several years now, was velocity-based training. I thought it was a really easy tool to look at objective output on a given day. It would, at a simple level, it can dictate the load that you're going to use based on the predetermined zone that you want to work in. And we would often do the mystery sets with it. So it would tell you when you were done.
Yeah.
So we would use a fixed rest period, let's say a minute to a minute and a half. You're doing 3 to 5 reps, 3 or 5 reps. It's not a range for us. You're going to do it at a velo of 0.6 to 0.65, and you got a minute to a minute and a half rest. So, we'll do our warm up sets. And when you hit that threshold of the velocity that we're looking for, you then ride it out until you're done. Now we do have a cap, because some guys, I've seen guys go as many as like 15, 20 sets. And I'm like, okay, we're done. That's enough.
Right.
We usually set a cap somewhere between 6 to 12 sets, depending on what we're doing. But that allows us, to monitor load and volume for an athlete without doing any other measures. So we don't have to look at a vertical jump and see, is their output down? Is their braking, rate of force development down, yada, yada. We can just see it in real time. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. And it allows athletes to get competitive. So when they are feeling fresh, they can always go a little bit harder. Now, getting into some of the more advanced tech, the thing that we added more recently have been just laser timing gates. I like using that. And I really like, using JB Moran's spreadsheet, where you can get a force velocity profile on athletes and really start to understand a little bit more of, okay, these two athletes run, a 4.6 or a 4.7. One has great acceleration, one has better top end speed, but they're crossing the line at the same time. So now you get a little bit more detail, and you can start to mailbox these athletes in terms of what kind of characteristics and capabilities they have naturally that we want to enhance, but also like, where do we want to give them that they're missing? So do they need more resisted runs? Do they need more top end speed and work on shorter ground contact times? Do they need to change orientation of force and angles? That again is, I think, very useful. And I think from the standpoint of communicating with our parents and athletes, it gives them, some real-time feedback in terms of, okay, I see this run change. I see them improve. And then next up for us was force plates. And, I worked with Drake, and I know you worked with Drake. He was really awesome at Hawkin Dynamics, getting us started with this stuff. And that really required a lot more, teaching myself and learning and revisiting a lot of the fundamentals of physics, force production, and, just how they're arriving at all these numbers, and then deciding what's meaningful.
You mean you're not going to look at all 60 metrics?
There's a lot there. If you guys don't know, it is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60, and it's very powerful. So again, it was, okay, what's happening in the jump, what's going to provide, the actual changes that we want to do. And so we use, the ODS framework that Hawkins put out, which is output. And very simply, that's the output metric. It's what we're looking at. It's jump height, it's speed, it's whatever the key variable is. But behind that, and, I always say under the hood, there is a driver. So in the case of speed, the next layer down is, well, what's stride length and stride frequency? Or in the case of a jump, it's propulsive net impulse, takeoff velocity. Those are the things that are driving this ultimate output. And then the strategy is the next layer down is just, well, how are they doing this to accomplish these results? Is their braking phase longer? Is their push more aggressive? Are they hitting higher peak forces? And that's where, really that's where we start to make the level of intervention. I can't change speed and just say, hey, just go faster or just push harder. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. And so that's what these variables that we're getting can really provide us. And then even as another layer, I'll look at capacity. So for example, today we had an athlete who was just testing a vertical jump, and he was center of mass was shifted so far forward. So, I mean, you could see that in his counter movement, his tibias were like really far ahead. His heels were coming off the ground. There started to be kind of a torque and a twist. And so it's like, well, we can change some of these, this counter movement depth and stuff like that. But really what we had to do was give him the ability to shift his center of mass back so that he could actually descend a little bit further. And we did that. And next thing you know, we did a side-by-side picture, and his counter movement depth had improved. His output had improved simply by understanding that. So it's like, you've got this kind of top down hierarchy of things, and it kind of spreads out as it goes. But, without getting too wide, we kind of dial into just a few things that I feel like are specific. So, for anybody out there who's looking to get into the force plates, it's going to require a little bit of learning and education and playing around with to see what kind of stuff is actually meaningful. So that's been a huge for us though, because we can use that as monitoring fatigue for athletes. We can use that just as a general check. We can look at asymmetries with our ACL kids. We can see a lot of stuff out of a vertical jump. I mean, it's very well researched. It's been known as a good proxy for, neuromuscular power, especially in the lower body. So we do it the akimbo or no arm swing. But the force plates have been great. There's more things that I would like to do with that. We're kind of playing around with like a 5.3 RSI. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that. For one, it's kind of hard when you're doing the repeat Kogler jumps for some of the kids to land on the same force plates over and over and over. Right. There's, obviously some inherent error. People who jump higher are going to have more velocity on each subsequent landing. So there's things to consider, but, again, it all kind of goes into the pool of data we're looking at, and it just becomes a flag, maybe not necessarily a red flag, but just something worth considering.
Yep.
And then more recently, we just added the Proteus. So this started just as like a gentle inquiry by me, and then
that's how it starts. Hey, I'm just kind of interested in it.
Yeah. And I got sucked in. One, I'm not going to lie. I love this stuff. I love the tech. I love understanding more about what I'm doing, because the better the assessment process is, the more I feel like I can deliver exactly what my athletes need when they need it. So I was a little unsure at first. I've seen like EC had the Proteus in like 2016 or 17. So I know it's been around a while, but one of the things that I really like about that, and that I think is so valuable, is that all of their data points go into a pool, and you can filter each athlete and by age, sport, position, you name it. You can really start to filter out this cohort. Now, it can get infinitely small where you're not comparing to as many numbers, but I mean, that's professional sports basically. But that's nice because like with the force plates, there's normative data I can find. I can find what an average, volleyball D1 player, what their vertical jump looks like. There's databases out there where you can access some of this information, but this gives me a comparison of this athlete to all of the kids in that cohort who have done this test. And so they get a really instant feedback about their power, their acceleration, and just, how they rank. So, some kids, it's like, this area is in real deficit. Like, I hate to tell you this, man, but we got some work to do. And there's other areas where it's like, wow, you are just you're exceptional at this. We maybe just need to add some more strength, or, hey, you're a little strength dominant. Let's work on velocity. So it just gives us a different perspective. And again, one of the things that I value about the Proteus is when you're using that dashboard and you're training with it in real time, it's looking at power and velocity. And I know, as still a recovering meathead, like it's just easy to chase strength. It's the easiest thing to quantify. It's the easiest thing to see improve. But velocity of contraction is so important. And so when you see power output as the metric, no different than velocity-based training, it's like you get competitive each rep. Because if I don't see it go up, I get kind of pissed, Like it brings another level of intensity and intention. And when we got so few reps and so few sets and so little bandwidth with our athletes anymore, it allows me to get a little bit more out of each session, each set, each rep with that athlete. And so I'm loving it so far. We've had it just a couple of weeks now. It hasn't even been a full month, but we're really still kind of playing with it, but it's very unique. It's fun, and I'm enjoying that. So that's definitely our newest piece of tech. I'm probably not done there. I don't know what else is out there yet. That's cool, but I'll find it.
So I really have 2 follow-ups to this. Number 1, you mentioned timing gates. What did you go with? What brand? Not that we're selling a brand, unless they're going to give me free ones, but what brand?
I went with Dasher. So I've been very pleased with them. It was down to them and I think one of the Bauer timing gates.
Yeah.
And I decided to go with Dasher. I don't remember what my rationale was at the time.
Okay.
The first batch I got, they had some issues. There were some known problems with a certain batch of them. The guys were super exceptional. Customer service standpoint, they sent me like a brand new set of lasers, sent the old ones back. So that was,
wow.
That was amazing. Cause I was outdoor trying to use them and test them, and like, they weren't working and the lasers weren't registering. And once I got the new ones, we've not had a single issue since. So whatever issue they had, they took care of it. And I super appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then my second question would be, for people that have been with you for a while, what is their perception of the change, right? Because I don't know, like sometimes I think some people are very resistant to change, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, why are you doing all this stuff now? And, it's been a gradual evolution. I think sometimes for us, it feels more drastic, and for them, it's just part of the process. But how has that change been received within your gym?
First of all, it's kind of a running joke that I'm always making changes. Because
yes.
If I just see something I don't like, I'll stop on a dime and turn.
Yep.
And we'll go the other direction. And I always joked with my team, I'm like, appreciate you guys hanging on. We're going to turn this bus around. It's a hairpin turn, and there's likely going to be some people flying out of the back. But we just got to deal with it.
Yeah.
But that said, I think it comes down a lot to the presentation of saying, hey, I know you have these goals as an athlete. These tools are really going to help us find out more and do a better job with you. And all you got to do is, jump on them, or you got to learn this thing. Now the Proteus is weird because people got to get used to how the resistance is with that.
Yep.
But everything else people have been all about, they want to see their numbers improve as athletes. They're competitive in nature. And, for us, it's not been hard. I think adults, they see the Proteus and they're a little bit more timid or concerned about what this thing is, but we're constantly trying new things with them. And for me, it just becomes not an obligation, but an invitation, and nobody really seems to decline. So for me, it's been a super seamless process. And honestly, I'm lucky because I feel like we have a gym full of people that trust me. They know I have their best interest. It is fun for me, and I enjoy doing all of this, but they know like it's really to deliver a better result for them. And so they'll go in, even if they're unsure or it's intimidating on some level, they'll give it a fair shot. So I've been super fortunate.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Now let's maybe bring these two worlds together. How has your assessment process evolved over the past 3 to 5 years? So you got Bill Hartman's intensive, right? And his model merged with all of the tech and all that. So what kind of baby has that created for an assessment process?
It's gotten simpler, to be honest. Our movement screen, before we were probably doing, table tests and checking joint range of motion. And and doing a lot of the chessboards, as Bill calls them.
Yep.
But, my athletes are upright. They're going against gravity. They're typically under trained or don't have much training under the belt other than sport. So we look at some squats, toe touches. We do a load propulsion test.
Yep.
That's about it on the movement screen. And I feel like we're able to catch a majority of what we need to from a training standpoint. If I've got an athlete who's, let's say I got a baseball guy and is having some UCL issues, we might start to capture some shoulder range of motion stuff and see if there's a little bit more there. But in most cases, like that's been pretty sufficient. I feel like if you know what you're looking for, a lot of the stuff it pops up pretty clearly. So we use that, and then we're starting to just expand the battery of things that we're doing with our athletes. So the force plates are becoming part of our onboarding process. That's good to get an initial baseline for our athletes. So we have something to compare. Again, when we're talking about buy-in, they want to see before and after. They want to see progress. So I want that data. We're filming some of the jumps too to see how that compares to some of the movement stuff. So now we're looking at their movements, but more in an explosive way. So, do these asymmetries, if you will, do they get magnified? Are there other strategies that are emerging that were maybe consistent with what we were seeing before? And then the Proteus is it's looking at rotational power and, more dynamic movements in 3 planes. So there are some challenges with that. I think, understanding when it is an output test that sometimes the movement quality of things is not maybe the way we would train. So I kind of let athletes just go with that and see what they show me. And then, keep that in mind as we're actually testing and as we're actually doing things. So, all in all, the assessment process is fairly simple. It's, a couple movements, it's some metrics, and then we have a setup in our gym now where we've kind of got certain metrics that we test on kind of a rotating basis each week, because I didn't want to take time out of my athlete schedule to have a full testing day. Some are in season, some are out of season. Getting them to all peak at this arbitrary time didn't really make sense. So what it does is it allows us to find trends over time and see if they're improving on the things that we want to see. So for example, some of the things we test are going to be their 10-yard sprint. We look at a lateral start. We'll do a 5-10-5, vertical jump, single leg vertical jump. They'll do max velocity on the true form, broad jump. So just pretty simple stuff where they can hit, 2-3 reps. And then we'll just take that into account. We have a little spreadsheet that we have. And it keeps little charts or report cards, as we call them, on our athletes. And so if someone starts to drop off consistently over time, it just gives us an opportunity to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, dude, I love it. And a couple of things that I wanted to know that you kind of brought into my brain here. First off, baseball, like the handful of baseball players that I've worked with over the years, like I'm evaluating their shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just feel like even if you don't do table tests, a baseball player expects you to eval their shoulder, right? And just check, hey, do I have my shoulder motion, right? In basketball, it's like ankles and knees, right? Do I have the ankle dorsiflexion that I need? Do I have the knee flexion and knee extension that I need? So there's an element of buy-in, right? Because you and I both know, like, this is a private sector game. There is a selling element to this. So you have to give them a little bit of what they expect. So, hey, man, I'm going to do some things that help increase buy-in. The other one that I'm so glad you mentioned, and I've been doing so much more of this, is I've been taking a lot more video throughout the process, because it's so impactful. On the first day, somebody's like, oh, my knees hurt when I squat. And then I take a side view video of how they squat and I show them, hey, here's why your knees hurt. And they're like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever explained that to me before. You give them a heel elevation and an anterior load, and you shift them back. They can squat deeper, no pain. It's immediate buy-in. Yeah. So, and it's in the moment, but then it's also, like you alluded to, it's those long-term trends, and you can show them, hey, 3 months later, hey man, do you remember how you used to squat? Look at how you squat now and how much more weight you can use. You posted a video a while back of your girl squatting, like really like pretty stacked. And I was like, dang, that's a good looking squat right there. So being able to just reinforce that, look, we found this inefficiency up front, right? We targeted it. Now this is how you're moving and how your performance has improved as a result. Like that's massive buy-in right there for any athlete.
100%. And I have to use video on speed stuff. I mean, it happens so fast. And I'm not lead tech yet.
Yeah.
So it's like, it becomes really valuable for me, for the athletes. It starts dialogue. And I went back, I have so many videos. I went back just the last like year and started making folders for all my different athletes. So I can dump these in as data points and just kind of track progress over time.
Yeah.
So we compare that to, what they're doing now. And it's good to see the improvements, because sometimes I don't even realize how much people have changed over time.
Yep.
And it's good to just go back and see that and kind of show them, just almost like a timeline of just, their body's changing. You don't realize how much muscle mass or how thin people get just from training hard. And then the improvement in their movement competency is, it's amazing.
Yeah. Again, I think one of our key themes today is just objectivity, right? Whether you're using a piece of tech, whether you're taking pictures and videos of your clients and athletes, like finding ways to be more objective in the training process is huge. Okay. So last question. You're obviously pulling from a lot of different data streams here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly to all of us, it's great. You can collect all this data, and we know plenty of people, they collect a ton of data and they do absolutely nothing with it. So how are you taking all this, parsing it down, and then using this information to help you write better programs?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to distill it down to ultimately what is the goal for the athlete and what is my goal for them. And then, the objectivity, all the data that we get, this is just a starting point. So if I want somebody to have a 30-inch vertical and they're at 12, it's not going to happen in a short time. So I think understanding where you are, but at the end, it's like you have to make a decision. You have to make a choice as a coach into how you're going to get this athlete to the next step. And so for me, when I think about a program, it's not just that program. I'm really thinking about like the next 3 months. Granted, there's a lot of conflicts and the training calendar with that and hiccups and stuff. But, it's almost in a simple way, it's like this accumulation, intensification, realization block. Like what are, in my mind right now, the key attributes that I need to improve? In a simple way, it's like, are we, in a force or strength deficit, or is it a velocity thing? And so we'll kind of cultivate that over the next several programs and, track data points along the way. So again, it's comparing those needs and wants. And I think ultimately using that data, it allows us to pick the lowest hanging fruit, but also to be under the right tree.
Yeah.
Which I think is so valuable.
Yeah.
And, it's just, finding congruence and harmony with those programs and just synthesizing that. So we track along the way. And if we get a little bit off course, that's okay. We can, veer back.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. And you made a great point up top, and I didn't harp on it then, but I'm going to come back to it now. This idea of just strength being the lowest common denominator, right? It's easy to coach. It's easy to test. For a lot of people, it's easy to see pretty rapid improvements especially when they're just starting to train. But I think the longer you do this, the less it's about, hey, just chasing arbitrary numbers. And it's, especially in the world of athletes, it's about making the athlete as successful as possible in their sport. And sometimes that's strength, sometimes it's other things. But if you're not taking the time to really dive in, assess them, figure out, what's working well here, what's not, and then really trying to develop a unique program for them, ultimately the athlete isn't getting the result that they could. So
100%. I mean, I was so biased to the strength side,
of course,
and I
Me too.
I think strength's great. I love it.
Yeah.
But there's the issue with sport of time. I'm under a time constraint. And if I'm not as fast as the other guy, or I can't tap into as much strength in a sufficient amount of time, then I'm late to the party.
Yeah.
So we have a couple kids who, their vertical jump is pretty good, but their time to take off is long.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, they either A, need a wind up, that they're not going to be able to get, or if they're in a game and they're under that time constraint, they're going to look like they don't have a good job. So,
yes,
that's where I think it becomes valuable too.
yeah, I love that, man. All right. Last but not least, lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions. Your answer can be as long or short as you like. Number 1, it's been pretty cool because like I love following people that I consider my people. You are definitely in that camp. Talk to me about how you got this first pro football player in, because it seems like you've got some traction there, man. It's cool to watch these guys.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. So the first one I got has been with me the longest. T. Will, or Travion Williams. So he's a running back for the Bengals. I think this is really going to be a big breakout year for him. We've had we were working in my garage originally during COVID. So
yeah,
we had a pretty tight bond in terms of the things he wanted to accomplish. He had a couple guys in front of him, and I'm always complimentary of him because he at every level up to the NFL, he's been the man, undisputably the man.
yeah.
Right? You get to the NFL and you got some studs in front of you, and everyone around you is a stud. So he's been extremely patient. He's been very humbled, I think, but hungry. And so, we've just been locked in for several years, kept him healthy. And I think this year he's ready to go. But we started because his girlfriend at the time was a former college athlete. And she was like, the NFL wives don't really like bar and yoga and stuff. So,
right.
So she wanted to train. So she found us. I started working with her, and just by happenstance, I got a hold of T. Will right before the quarantine, like probably a month. And so at that point we were locked in, and I trained with them all summer until they went back to training camp.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I love it. It's cool to watch those guys, man. I've only had, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 NFL players ever. But they are a different breed, man. They are a different breed.
Yeah. It's like, I know plenty of powerlifters who are stronger. I know sprinters who are faster. I know volleyball players who can jump higher, but the intersection of those things that they do is just superhuman.
Yeah. It's crazy. Okay. Number 2, best hands on hips CMJ you've seen so far on force plates.
Okay. It's almost 23 inches. That's like 0.5. I had to do the math because I know you use meters. 0.58.
Oh, wow. Dude, what do they play?
Baseball.
Shut up. Dude, that's some serious lower body power, man.
Yeah, this dude's he's a stud.
I need to see video of that, man.
I might have it. Let me see. I'll see if I can find it after this.
Yeah, I would love to see it. We've had a couple 56, 57. I think Ed will eclipse that once. I've just been killing this guy with like lower body strength development. He is your prototypical rubber band, so I'm trying to give him some force to support the velocity. But dude, 58, that's a big jump, man. That's a big jump.
It might be shy of 58. I'm rounding up the inches, so I couldn't remember exactly what it is, but I'll pull it.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know.
It's in the ballpark. That's
still good. That's elite. Number 3, you and I, back when I was writing your programs, you were pushing some heavy weights. So talk to me about the peak. Where did you top out at? And then talk to me about what your training looks like now.
Shoot. So let's see. So this was all 2019. I had a powerlifting meet that year. I think I was training for one, or pretty close to. So my last meet numbers were 502 squat, 335 bench, and 655 deadlift.
What weight class?
90 kilo.
So 198. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was pretty good.
That's some big weights, boy. That's big weights.
I wanted to hit 7. I ended up hitting 670 at the Tactical Strength Challenge later that year. It was with a deadlift bar, so kind of doesn't count. But after that, kind of got a little too gritty with my training and didn't back off, and had a little hip sciatica thing come up. And so kind of wanted to find something to do. Obviously the NFL guys started coming in. So I'm like, oh, I got a lot of strength. I just can't move. Like, I was literally a Lego man. Cause I pulled, for you guys listening, I pulled sumo in competition. So my hips were crazy, just wrecked and super tight. And so now it's mostly jujitsu. training, which has been, it's great. I've been doing it about 2 years. There's some days I get in the car after and I don't listen to the radio and I just drive in silence and just think about how these guys that are a couple belts above me are just completely manhandling me. And I come in and it's like super sweaty, cause you got the gi and my wife's like, what happened? I'm like, I don't even know where to start. Like I'm like, when I tell you, like, it's a grown man, like wrestling a baby, like it's like me going against my 8-year-old son. Like I was helpless. And like, me and this other guy are kind of looking at each other. Like, he's like, oh, you did better than I did. I'm like, I don't know. So, it's been super fun. It's been really great for my hips. I've got to keep my strength up. I still think that's really valuable. I've learned where maybe I overuse strength, cause I guess out really quick, but, working on the endurance side, especially for that, has been an extreme challenge for me. So, really trying to revisit a lot of Joel's stuff. And just figure out how to build a gas tank that's big enough without dropping a lot of the other stuff off. And in between that, I still do a lot of, athletic stuff on the turf, move, jump.
Love it.
Just in case they ever call me up for the Overmen 30 basketball league.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay. Last but not least, number 4, what's next for Ryan Patrick?
The gym, we're going to upgrade. I think we're going to be making a move in the next year. So we need a little bit more space. We've only got about 20-ish, 25 yards straight line. So would love to have a longer setup. I think that's the priority, continue to just, figure out this assessment process, make it smooth, make it feasible, give more athletes access to it and do what we can to help, as many athletes as possible. Reach their athletic goals. Me personally, clowning around, we got Danger Wheel this weekend, which is the trike tournament for adults in Cincinnati. And other than that, man, just, I'm coaching my son a little bit with some different sports. So having fun with that. And, that's just it. Just being a dad most of all.
Yeah. No, I get it, dude. I get it. Well, Ryan, man, it's always great catching up with you. I love just where you're at and seeing your evolution over the last, I don't even know, 15 years we've been hanging out and chatting. So it's been cool to see, man. Talk to me. Where can my listeners find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, I spend most of my social media time on Instagram. It's at Coach Ryan Patrick. So you hit me up there, send me a message, and love to connect.
I love it, man. We'll get that in the show notes. And again, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on, brother. I really
appreciate it, man. It's great to be back.